Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
Welcome. My name is Scott Thompson. Welcome to the excellent adventure of Houdini mentorship. We have some very excellent folks joining us today. I'm the co-owner and senior academic advisor at Think Tank, but I do take a very sort of personal role when it comes to mentorships and specific students like the one we're going to meet today. I did take a very active role. It's a beautiful day here in Vancouver, Canada, 9 degrees, sunny outside. Thank you for joining us. I know some of you are up very late or very early in the morning, so I appreciate your time and staying up late or getting up early to join us. I'm pretty sure you're going to love what we have for you today. Before I introduce our guests, I'd like to say a little bit about mentorship in general and kind of how Think Tank looks at it. I've been a teacher for more than 20 years, and I've noticed a few things about learning and what it takes to be successful in this industry. I would say, first of all, that this industry is not for everybody. It's tough. You know, it's tough to get in. It's hard work once you're in. I would say it's tremendously gratifying and exciting, which I think is what makes us go. You must be very dedicated and willing to do the work to get there. It's a tough push. I think that with most people, it takes about 50% of their energy to get 90% of the way there, and then another 50% to get that last 10%. And that 10% is the part that pushes you from good to great. And I think great is where you have to be to make it in this business. There are lots of people wanting in the business, but not everybody can get there. So this is where mentorships come in, because I think that last 10%, that final magic piece, needs a mentor to get there. A great mentor, like the one you're going to meet today, is someone that can push you that last part of the journey, guide you right to the top. Please, I know you're going to have some questions, so please keep those till the end. If you were to type them in the chat, we can get to those later, rather than expecting us to stop and answer questions in the midst of it. We do want to show you the process that we went through here, but also demonstrate Houdini as well. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But first of all, let's meet our guests. The first fellow I met 2 or 3 years ago. He hails from Israel. He arrived in Vancouver, and I met him, and we talked about it, got to know him a little bit, looked at his work. He has a very solid understanding of CG and started that way. I mean, he knew a lot. He had a couple of pretty big pieces that were very impressive. He also had an amazing attitude. He gave me the feeling that no challenge was too big for him. There's nothing that he couldn't do. And I have to say, I meet hundreds of people looking to get in this business, and every once in a while, somebody comes along that impresses me with this ability. And believe me, it doesn't happen too much. So when I met Orion, I was cautiously optimistic that he could pretty much do whatever he wanted. He kind of expressed an idea. It was a little rough still, but he had a kernel of an idea that was pretty good. We talked about it, massaged it a little bit. In a lot of cases, when someone brings these ideas to me, generally I tell them it's too much, it's too big. These things take a long time. They're hard. They underestimate the effort and the time it's going to take. But in Orion's case, I kind of thought, you know, this guy, he could probably do this. You know, this is the guy that I think might actually pull this off. And so, you know, we got behind him as a school, and we get behind all of our students. But in his case, I have to say, I did give him a little extra love just because I saw the potential and I could just see the gleam in his eye. I just knew this guy was going to do some great things. That's kind of how I felt about him. So I'll just invite Orion to say a couple of words. Orion, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about your beginning with the mentorship.
First of all, thank you, Scott, for having me here. It's definitely been a ride joining Think Tank, and I did have a little bit of experience beforehand. I'm very enthusiastic when it comes to CGI in all forms. And I've gotten a lot of support from you and the school in general. And the fact that you supported my crazy idea, I guess I tend to go a little bit further than usually what I think I can handle, but just a little bit. And having that kind of support, having that someone that has your back, it definitely helps, a person like me to try and push those limits. I think that's what this industry is all about. So yeah, it's been a great ride.
It was fun too. I mean, it was exciting. I mean, every time you showed me something new, I just get excited for you and for the whole process. Each time I saw you, it had changed in a big way and in a good way. And I know that there were times when you had a little bit of self-doubt, but you were taking big bites. I mean, these were big bites.
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised at all that you felt overwhelmed. So can you maybe just briefly talk about just your decision to take a mentorship and why you felt that was kind of the path you wanted to go on?
Yeah, definitely. So I basically came to Vancouver in 2016. I kind of like scouted the area, saw what options that there are, because I knew that I wanted to study abroad for a very long time. I studied for a short period in Israel, and that was the time where I sort of like felt, okay, I hit a certain ceiling. Vancouver is definitely the place to do it. And I scouted around, and the mentorship program in Think Tank definitely was a highlight, because I personally needed someone to guide me. I needed a sort of like a mentor, basically, that is suitable to understand which direction I'm coming from and which direction I want to go to. And that was my major decision to make that kind of like move to the other side of the planet, and the choice to actually go to Think Tank.
And you also were taking on not just an ambitious project, but you're also getting into a piece of software, Houdini, that is a bit of a bear. Like it's a big beastie program. Yeah. But it's really just not for everyone. It's complicated. There's a lot of math, coding helps, etc. So you saying I want to go down the Houdini road.
Yeah.
I just kind of go, okay.
I didn't know that right off the bat. I didn't know I was going to go for Houdini.
Yeah.
So I kind of came from a compositing background, and I thought I was going to be a compositor. I kind of like put that aside because I said to myself, try something you haven't tried before. I guess that's what I'm going to try and do, like practically forever. See what I don't know yet and go there. And Houdini is scary. First time I opened Houdini was actually before I came to Vancouver. I was like in Israel, just like okay, I'm gonna download it and see what's up. Opened it, started crying, closed it, and that was my first introduction into Houdini. And then the decision came to use basically my time in Think Tank to broaden my horizons.
And we talked about once you made the decision to do a mentorship, we did a little bit of pre-training with our good friend Brandon, which was just sort of laid a foundation for you, so you weren't an absolute newbie when you got into Albert's space.
Great guy.
And then you came to me. I think, I'm not sure if I suggested Albert, if you brought him to me, but I'd known Albert before, and so when you brought him up, I went, well, this guy's a rock star, so you can't really go wrong with Albert. In fact, I would have to say, when it comes to Albert, I have to make sure the student is good enough for Albert, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Because you can't just give somebody to a very high-level mentor and expect the mentor to really be able to work with them if they haven't got the chops for it, because some of it is pretty steep stuff. So on that note, let's hear from Albert a little bit. Not just a little bit. Albert's he's an industry veteran of 20 years. Worked around the world for companies like Sony ImageWorks, Weta Digital, Industrial Light and Magic, to name a few of the big rock stars of CG. Currently working at Double Negative here in Vancouver. He's mentored for us for a while and has always been one of those guys that you just knew your students were in great hands with Albert, because he really brings he brings everything. He doesn't just bring knowledge. He brings emotional support. He brings his personality. He's got a great sense of humor, which sometimes you need when things are going wrong. You need someone that's going to sort of help you along when things don't always work out, and things don't always work out. So Albert Szostkiewicz, welcome to our webinar.
Hey. Yeah, thank you for that great introduction as well, and thank you for having me here.
Can you just talk a little bit about when you first met Orion and just sort of what your first impressions were?
Well, it was actually a funny story because I heard about Orion willing to have a Houdini guidance, Houdini mentorship from multiple people, and then you, Scott, contacted me, and I thought that's great. That's a great opportunity. And yeah, when I met Orion, I noticed that he has this huge project, and I was like, that's a huge project. I was a little bit scared about it, but I noticed that Orion was picking up a knowledge like a sponge. It was just instant, and I knew that okay, that's I think we can do it. That's doable. Because this is always the problem that kind of beginning, when you don't know person, you don't know, what are the limits, what are the possibilities. Some people, have some kind of artistic background. Some people have technical background, and you have to figure out what's your ground. And it turns out that this project is perfect for Orion, and it went great.
Well, let's be clear about projects in general for mentorships. I mean, these projects are vehicles. These are projects that are designed to show off learned skills. So you want to be able to showcase your talent, and you need a project that's just right. You need one that showcases everything properly, but also is doable in a reasonable amount of time. And I imagine when I first saw the first animatic, I was like, oh, geez, And especially because we were thinking live action plates a lot too, and there's a whole part B to reach. By the way, there's a second part that we haven't seen yet. But I would just we talked about it a lot, Orion and I, and it was one of those things where I thought, I'm going to let Albert make this call because he's the only one that really knows.
Well, with Reach also. When we saw the whole picture, I just realized that it is a great project and he can definitely execute it. But I felt that we might have to divide it into two sections, just making sure that we have the first part nailed in and have the first ground with Houdini, and then we could move to the second part, which is even more challenging than the first part.
Yeah.
I have to say, so that will be another ride.
Yeah. Well, fortunately and unfortunately, Ryan's now at ILM, so I don't know whether they're going to give him 5 seconds rest to do part 2. I know that company is busy.
Time to breathe.
What's that, Orion?
I'm trying to find time to breathe.
Yeah, right.
Basics first.
Yeah. I'm going to pass the baton over to my good friend and colleague, John Bierman. John's the guy that looks like he's at the International Space Station. He's actually not in space, although he appears to be. So I'm going to let John sort of guide us through some of the the more technical stuff as we move forward. And we really want to make this webinar informational. So we really want Orion and Albert to showcase some of the tools they used and some of the techniques, and show us some of the power behind Houdini and what it's capable of. So I'm going to pass it over to you, John. John's a composer, he's a videographer, he's a camera guy, he's a tech guy, he's a musician. The guy can do it all. So, and he's also a very good speaker. So here you go. Welcome, John Bierman. Oh, I think you're muted, John. Oh, he's miming.
Language.
He's miming. All right. Well, we'll work on that there for a minute and see if we can get John back. But in the meantime, I'm just going to pass it over to Orion and Albert, and I'll let you guys take it, and you can discuss the making of this project.
All right. So hey, let's start from the beginning. So when I met Orion, he already had some idea in his head. He already had a storyboards, and I have to say that Orion, you actually have a perfect, drawing skills. I'm not sure if you can also share with us something, but that was our starting point, and I remember you were going slowly towards the animatic, right? Yeah. You had like a first animatic slides. So I remember that most important for me was to make sure that this project will be not only a personal project, but will be also something that would prepare for work, for real life work. Therefore, we immediately structured your project into like a project like it would happen in a studio. That means we have created a show with a show code, because in this big budget movies usually are secretly coded. They have secret codes, and
that's stuff I haven't done before, didn't know about,
and we named it Teddy.
Yep, code name.
Hi guys, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Hey, John.
Okay.
Perfect.
Teething troubles. What happened when I was gone?
Let's
need to answer a question.
No, I was starting to describe how we went into the project.
Sure, the overview of it. Yeah, and you storyboarded this whole thing, right? You put pen to paper or Cintiq to tablet.
Yeah, it kind of started where I did this robotic arm kind of model, look dev animation. And at some point I kind of felt lost, and I went to Scott and said, maybe you can help me figure things out. Like, what am I supposed to do? And he gave me this advice, an idea of just like creating maybe an interaction between a robot and a child. And I was like, okay, I'll develop something on it. And I started sketching a few rough sketches and developing a storyboard for it. And I remember receiving a lot of amazing help from students, just helping me a little bit with composition, giving me ideas, developing story aspects. Sometimes when you have an element, you want to know what the background is for storytelling's sake. And
Ryan, can you throw the animatic up on the screen right now while you talk?
Yeah.
Maybe we can watch the whole thing, like the second part.
Yeah, it's completely, together, and I broke it down into, give me some filler, guys. I'll load it up.
Cool, it's really great. The second part's great. A little less Houdini in the second part, I think, but and
the bulk of the stuff really happens in the first part in terms of eye candy and whatnot. But yeah,
the robotic arm that I pulled from your art station is the kind of prototype idea for what is going to emerge from this pod, right?
Yeah, basically. So funny, guys. The whole button is gone.
You cannot share.
Yeah.
All right, wait. Yeah, we cannot. We are not allowed. We cannot share, John. We might need your help.
Oh dear. I have a share screen option.
Oh, John. I see what's happening. When the screen goes smaller, the button disappears. It's okay.
I see. Okay, because I did not have an answer for you there.
I see it now.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Ryan, is that the case for you as well? Is your share screen available to you now?
Indeed.
Awesome.
So yeah, this used to be the old name. I basically just threw a name in there for some dramatic sake, and I'm apologizing in advance. It's all dramatic. The idea was to basically create a bunch of interesting shots. I didn't really think too much regarding to going deeply into a full feature film storyline. But the idea was to definitely get a few elements in there that could demo a bunch of skills and taking Houdini into consideration. So definitely a re-entry effect would be a very cool thing to do. A lot of smoke and a dramatic big explosion that violently covers the camera, and an aftermath to go with it. This is basically where the first part kind of stopped, where the bulk of the effects is. And from this part comes a lot more of a character interaction kind of story that we see basically something emerging from the pod, and a child from the beginning that you saw very briefly that we don't really know anything about. So I sat down and basically tried to make up a story, again, a little bit cheesy, but maybe think along the lines of Interstellar kind of world where resources are kind of lacking, and humans are kind of trying to come up with new solutions, descending droids into space and back to get information. So us as viewers, we don't really understand what's happening. And I thought this interaction of this really tall robot-looking figure, sort of like almost intimidating in front of a very small child. But then we see that they have this really, curious interaction between them. And I didn't really plan on having a plot twist. I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. But at some point I talked to a few friends, and then this whole idea came up that the child is actually a robot and they're transferring information between one another. So that sums up that portion of the storyboard that is definitely cut in between at the middle to create parts.
I think that's beautiful. I didn't actually see that whole animatic before, so I didn't even know what the twist was. That was the first time I saw that.
I remember I saw it. It looks great, and then I thought that okay, we have also character animation, and it's doable. But to cover all of those topics at the same time, it's a little bit overwhelming. So we have to focus first on the first part where we can get into Houdini, into FX, and then slowly we can get to the human, because now we have to deal with a human interaction, skin shaders, and so on. It's a different beast.
The idea was actually to film all this, like go out to the field. There are a lot of nice farming fields here in Canada. I could have gone anywhere. I had multiple chances with Scott. Scott offered, and I remember I talked to you, Albert, as well, and a bunch of friends also offered. But at some point, I think I just realized I don't want to go out. I want to stay home, and it's easier to do it in CG for me.
Yeah, we were thinking about even drone to make some kind of a photogrammetry.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, at some point when we were still designing your project, going from that part into layout. I'm not sure if you have layout.
Yeah, definitely. So
that was the moment where we started designing it a little bit deeper and further, and it's sort of kind of transformed into the place where we realized that is actually, we can do it fully in 3D because combining that in a real life footage is yet another problem to solve. Oh, that's the first layout.
Yeah, because there were many elements. First of all, it's outdoors, and doing an environment that's convincing outdoors is very challenging. I've never done that before. That was definitely my first take on that. As you can see, some portions are chopped. I remember, Albert, the first time we actually met in sessions, the first thing we did was see how we could improve the layout as much as we could. We tightened it up. Initially, it was a little bit more lengthy, like you saw in the storyboard. There was a lot of drama to build up, but we kind of tightened it up and made sure that it's appealing, and more flowing.
Like a dynamic timing, yeah.
Exactly.
It looks to me like you were pretty much locked with the camera angles and the moves right from the get-go. Like you, and that did not change.
Yeah, this is where actually I remember, Ryan, and I have to highlight that fact as well. It's a usage of references. How references were very important because you can be very talented DOP or director, and with time it gets this kind of experience. But if you're not the person who creates a cameras on an everyday basis, it's something that definitely you need some kind of references. And I know, Orion, you had a nice set of references from all over the places.
Can even do this.
And so not only are you referencing, the look of a texture or the design of an asset, but you're also actually referencing camera angles. Do I have that right? Like, and hands and moves and chases and that too.
This is actually something that, if I'm thinking about a lot of movies that I watched as a kid, there are so many references, things that we've seen before that, we can always mimic. Because I trust myself in certain things, but reinventing the wheel for me is not really something that I feel comfortable doing. So a lot of the stuff that I'm gonna share the other screen just for PureF is just kind of still weird for me. So I'm not. Oh my god! Yeah. Yeah. In PureF, I basically gathered a bunch of elements, and mainly shot compositions. So you can see that I really did not invent the wheel. A lot of the things that I drew inspiration from, Man of Steel, Gravity, Life, there are all of the stuff, even Smallville right there. All of the stuff that you could probably relate in, shot composition to my storyboard comes directly from that. So I would say it's a huge advantage to, observe movies, observe as much as you can. They did it so right. So we can only learn from that. And that's exactly what I did. I reverse engineered most of the shots that I've ever seen in movies, just to put a lot of ideas in my head. And this is kind of how this came up. And then, you can always reiterate on top of that. That's exactly what Albert and I did. Because, you get a reference, but sometimes you want something to work a little bit more in your favor. Sun direction, like lighting in general composition. Once your effects come into the picture, things kind of shift balance. So you always have to keep on top of that.
Regarding the pod itself, which is really the hero asset, I mean, obviously it's the hero asset of this part of the movie. It is the character as such. Like, where did you look for inspiration on how to design that?
So yeah, that's a good question. So in this storyboard, I think I took from just an image that I found of Star Wars, just an escape pod kind of thing. Then I actually looked on ArtStation for just a bunch of designs. I didn't really want to clutter it up with something too complex. I wanted to acknowledge my skills as a 3D artist. I am not the most amazing modeler there is. There are things that I still have to learn, and hard surface is a challenge. But I found, I think, the concept that I felt was the most appropriate for me to use. It's made by Fong, and you could find it on ArtStation, Henry Fong. And I think in some ways it's very stylized. It has something, of an element that could look a little bit toyish. But I really, really liked how, it's elegant. It's designed in an elegant way that I could also utilize my effects on top of it. I wanted to look for something that, has that kind of shape at the bottom, so it wouldn't interfere too much with my, my effects. Because everything has to be in a symbiotic relationship at the end.
And this is also the moment where I want to highlight the importance of references. Really, there's nothing wrong with having inspiration like that from other great artists, great directors. It's something that you can harvest and create something new out of it. And as a supervisor on an everyday basis, when we create any type of effects, or even when we do lighting, we always gather references, and we always discuss with the references, whenever it's a real life reference, or even like animated movie reference, or other movie reference. It's something that we can relate to. So this is great, yeah.
And Albert, in our talks earlier, one of the things that we kind of talked about was how it may seem obvious, but what are effects exactly? Like, what does it mean when we talk about effects?
Well, that's a good question, and effects is actually a very broad topic. I think I settled down with a description that if there is something that you cannot register using camera and cannot hand animate, it's probably effects. So it's not only explosions, not only water simulation, but it could be a lot of other stuff. Sometimes you have to create maybe animated forests, or maybe some magical stuff in Harry Potter. Anything that cannot be really animated. So sometimes there are some kind of how we call it procedural effects, which we can get deeper into that. It can be a lot of stuff, I have to say.
And in the case of Reach, it's the sparks flying off the pod as it's entering.
For example, yes, a sparks, a fire, even like a animated foliage, and that was there was a lot of kind of, I would say, invisible effects that is happening there. Oh yeah, you have that.
Yeah, so definitely stuff that we knew that we could go for simulation. Like Albert said, I think one of the strengths, like many strengths that Albert has, is to evaluate a shot and go towards the approach that would be the most efficient, the most reliable in that kind of way. Because when you're working on a big project, you always have to make certain decisions, and that was a huge part for me to understand that not everything has to be simulated. Like for instance, foliage and vegetation, that we used just systems of vex to manipulate points, and you could always create something without having to go into simulation and complex solutions.
A little bit in detail about that.
Yep.
I have it here.
Exactly that.
Yeah. So
these are probably L systems, right?
Well, actually, it is, but not necessarily has to. It was just for the presentation purpose.
Right. Oh, okay. Sorry.
But the idea is that with an experience of an effects artist, in my personal opinion, the more experience you have, the less of simulation you want to do, because simulation, however great it is, it's very hard to control. And when you end up getting some kind of a feedback, a comment, change here, change that, you realize that giving most of your work to the software gives you a smaller ability of a control. So this is where you, as an artist, you need to try to figure it out, how to do stuff maybe other way, something that it's really controllable. This kind of also gets back to like first movies like The Abyss, like when we have this kind of water character coming out, there's no simulation there. So in this very example, we had pod that is hitting the ground, and there is a explosion, and with that explosion that we have foliage that kind of waves and reacts to that explosion. So one of the idea was simply have ability control that with some kind of a geometry we could quickly and interactively animate our foliage. It's something that, completely do not require any simulation. You can think of that, it might be simple, but when you look at the final image, something like this is visible on the screen for a split of the second. Nobody is going to think how it was created. As an artist, it's important what's the final output of it. So just to quickly show you what's happening here, I simply created a few points on a grid, and we have our control geometry with a color. I use the color because this is a very easy way of controlling area. In this case, I'm transferring color from one object to another, and with a very simple math of literally mixing one vector onto another, which tells you whenever our copied foliage is going to be upward or just laying down, I'm controlling that mix literally using color. It's so simple, but yet again so effective. And the thing is not about even simplicity of this effect. It's about being able to distinguish when and how you can make a decision. Do you really need to simulate that?
I think your choice to use red in this context is especially it illustrates beautifully the power of Houdini, because red, of course, is the first of the three vectors in color, and red is on X. So effectively, when you're writing red to a point attributes yours, and then you're basically saying, well, X, go in X direction, which is effectively what you've written into the attribute.
And this is also how I do my effects. I always try to simplify things. Like, we always think like they are matrices, quaternions, and you can go very crazy about it. And try to simplify your problem to the 0 and 1. It's really math between 0 and 1 is way simpler. Second example is little bit more complex when it comes to Vex for some, but the same idea, just maybe ability to not only to control where that object is, but maybe we want to control how it actually reacts. So maybe it reacts and everything goes down with certain distance that we can also say how wide. So this is what I was trying to go through with Orion, just making sure that we can create effects, not necessarily with a simulation, but mostly understanding the final output of it.
This was actually applied for more than one thing. That was applied, for instance, for the vegetation, but I used it also for just eliminating the problem of what am I going to do with the ground? Like the ground is supposed to explode into a million pieces, but there was no need. So I see a lot of projects that people do for effects usually are very complex. They can collapse a building down, and obviously that is a very complex thing to do. But at the very end, what happens when a building collapses is that you get a ton of smoke, a ton of dust, and it's covering up the camera. Technically speaking, that is definitely, an amazing way to learn how to do multiple stuff and also show it in a tech demo reel. But in my case, I think what I really wanted to do is go through the shot and see exactly what I need. And in this case, I didn't even simulate the ground. I just created blend shapes and in 3D Studio Max exported it and used it as my base. And it needed no more than that. From this direction, all you see for 5 frames is basically the ground elevating a little bit, and that's it.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people start thinking about grains and some kind of a.
Tell them now you could do stuff like that, which it takes time, and eventually it will look amazing. Depends on your angle of camera, what you're planning it to show, etc., like stuff like that. So yeah.
I can also relate to a few projects I did in the past in my life. On one Harry Potter movie, for example, there is an effect of characters kind of teleporting. So it's kind of a very fast effect of kind of a rotation and characters disappear and appear. And I remember we got this kind of a task in Houdini to create, and we tried with transferring plate on the points and maybe deforming points with pop, maybe with some kind of a forces. And then one day, a colleague of ours, who is a matte painter, he paints usually backgrounds, and he literally took that shot and painted 3 frames and done. And that was the final effect. And this what realized to me is that
Apparition effect in Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's about a final image. It's not about how you get there. It's about what you get out of it.
Yeah.
And that blend shape would just work great, because literally there was like 3 frames.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you really are forced into figuring out what is the most efficient path to the final result that you need.
I think that the biggest problem is when you get comments, because when you simulate something like that and you have to change something, sometimes it's an hours of waiting of getting the simulation back.
Yeah, so you're constantly thinking about how do I make this as art directable as possible.
Also, I wanted to mention here that we tried to structure the whole project how professional VFX project would be structured. That's why you see we went through storyboarding, then layout, then on top of that, when we have effects and then lighting, we try to do really in a very structured way. This way I wanted to make sure that when Orion is getting into the project, that it will be simple and easy to get, for example, right now in ILM. And it's the same type of working.
Yeah, so we did a structure almost right off the bat, I think. The first few sessions, we immediately created templates. Basically, as you can see, I got comp laid out right at the top, slap right underneath it, lighting, layout, previs, and the storyboard, which would have gotten here in a different version. But it helped me keep track of basically everything. If I create a new shot, I go through each of the departments, export my movies, and basically I have nesting layers, so I can go into layout, check out my layout here, or obviously compare it from the previs to see what changed from that point. And if I'm making changes, sometimes, like for instance in this shot, you can see sometimes the angle changes a little bit, sometimes timing changes, or the animation itself. So I went through multiple revisions per shot, which otherwise could have been like very hellish to track it. And especially in like a shot like this, which was hyper complex, and I went through so many revisions just trying to improve it. And I remember each time I was talking to Albert about every shot, I wanted to show him like every version and compare it back and forth. So that was probably one of the most important things I've learned, to track versions.
Actually, when we went through that shot, that the pot is coming through the air.
Which one?
I just remember about the effect of the fire that you have created. That's also something that a lot of people were asking, I remember.
Oh yeah, so I can definitely even demo it. So basically I can show you the basics of my approach. We can even go like that. So like we said, we took inspiration from basically gravity, life, and a lot of other pieces that, sort of introduced a certain level of re-entry fire. I realized after a lot of research that it's not really fire, it's a lot of sparks that are basically conjoined together to make it seem like it's fire, because fire can't really sustain itself in space. So we were definitely going for that kind of look.
I would just add that the reason why we also took references from the movies, because, well, you can't find real reference of anything entering into space. That's so it's a little bit of artistic imagination here.
You sent me one. We found one. It was like super blurry, and everything was shaking. And you can't really film it. So yeah, we have to rely on that, and kind of like the work that studios did. They did it sometimes mathematically. So I went and learned from whatever I could from that. And definitely created passes. We broke it down to elements and try to investigate when we're seeing that kind of effect. How do we break it down into what kind of elements are we seeing? So we went kind of like broadly. We definitely see the smoke right here. We definitely see that there is a high amount of volume of sparks that are kind of like dense together. And then there are the individual sparks that are kind of like stretched out longer. So we knew there are three major layers to that. And obviously it's up to the user, the artist, to add more than that. And I went ahead and just gave it a little bit more, language of my own. So I definitely had something along those lines. I had sparks that are separate and two layers of smoke. One is more dense in volume, that kind of trails behind, and another that is kind of like the strips. They're coming from subtle edges, kind of like to complement the shape of the pod. So I had multiple revisions of that.
I'm also going to add here that one of the reasons why we have divided that into different elements is to make sure that we can focus not only on one particular problem at the same time, but also when one of those elements do not work or we have to improve it, you don't have to render everything at the same time. You already have every other element. You just have to put it together. So it was easier to have them separate and then put them together in Nuke.
And we'll definitely get to that part with using deeps, and that you also introduced me to. In this setup, I basically went with a kind of like thought, okay, there's definitely a vector field happening with a wind tunnel, and I wanted to sort of visualize it to understand what is happening there. It's kind of like an onion shape, depending on the shape of the object, obviously, but creating this from a kind of a low-res smoke sim that if I go in, you could see that it's not really high-res. It's taking collision from the object itself after I VDB it, and basically simulating just with just an emission, which I'll show you in a bit. And basically, I think, I'm using the valve from the wind tunnel. The wind tunnel you could see right here, which I dictate based on the direction of the object. Now, in this setup, I'm not really utilizing the optimization that we did, but essentially...
Actually, before you go further, Ryan, we kind of did, because first optimization that you have done here is like, if you guys notice, everything is positioned in an origin in a 0, 0, 0.
Right.
While your pod is actually flying through the space. So using at least Houdini, back then that was I think 17 or 16.5, I think 17, it does not utilize a VDB sparse volumes. Therefore, simulating everything under the angle would generate a huge containers of the volume. So we had to normalize it into the space that would be in an origin, and we inverted all the animation so it's along the x-axis. Therefore, we could really focus on a specific section of the animation rather than dealing with something that would be under the angle. On top of that, we also had to take in consideration that we have to inverse rotations of the motion of the pod. We have to compensate for that motion. So pod is not moving in this case, but air is moving. So we reverse the logic. Instead of pod flying through, we did a word flying instead of the pod. And the gravity force also had to be inverted, so that instead of being just down, in this case, it's a little bit angled because the whole world was rotated. So that was one of your optimizations.
I remember that I came to you and I said, like, listen, Sensei, this object is moving at like, I don't know, what was the actual speed, Mach 1? I normalized it to Mach 1. It's way more than that. The speed of reentry is insane. And I had to normalize it down, but also trying to simulate an object moving at that kind of speed is basically going to require someone to create multiple grids if they want to simulate it. But then again, the camera always follows the object. In this case, at least, there are always stuff that you have to think about. Where is the camera? Where can I take measures to try and utilize better optimization? And this is exactly what we did here. By localizing it, I didn't have to move my grid. My grid could have stayed static, completely static, and just creating a wind tunnel that is based on the object of the speed of the object. I could create basically just all the physical attributes while still remaining in world space. That allows for a lot more control if you want to do something and save time, and otherwise it would have taken a lot of effort. So I'm definitely creating the wind tunnel that is taking the vector from the object. It doesn't really matter what object it is, but the new method that I'm doing is I'm taking a low-res sim, and I'm basically only taking the information of the vector. So I only use it for basically what's it called? Advection. Sorry. So advecting the particles through it will allow me to get basically the same shape that you saw in the vector field. So that's how I'm creating, and it's not really a simulation per se, I would say. I mean, there are ways to simulate it directly in a dot network in one go, but again, there are so many ways. That's one thing I learned from Albert. There are practically infinite amount of ways to do at least one thing. So I kept even reiterating on top of any effect that I did, try to find the right solution for it. And that's kind of how I'm separating 3 different elements, one into sparks, and I have another one that it's going to cook or probably, yeah, it's pretty good. So it creates that on the fly. And the thing that I kind of wanted to introduce is that I can basically, I don't know if it will work that way, but yeah. I can introduce like any object that I want. It's going to cook for a little bit. So for instance, like a cube. And I'm just going to, give it a little bit of motion. Directly from just the cube. I didn't do anything to it. And it will basically take any information that it has. If it has any vector information, it will take its speed into account, and we'll just generate it on top of that. And I can definitely show you like a final result. That it's just a cube, but you could still generate it from anything. So that kind of a procedural way of thinking changed it completely for me, because before I actually went into Houdini, I used 3D Studio Max. And you remember, Albert, I kept telling you, like, but in 3D Studio Max, they used to do it like this and that, but they don't really give you access to any information that happens behind the scenes. You don't really get any vector information. You know, if you use Fume Effects, which I used in the past, and it's amazing. But if you really want to get into it and make it procedural and work, as a tool in a pipeline, that is definitely the way to go about it. So yeah, and I personally learned a lot from that. So that's specifically just taking the pig head, the famous pig head, and applying the forces on it, just from the basic smoke sim, the low res one. From this, I basically advect particles, and that could definitely give you the gist of particle friction if you want to do a re-entry at any point.
And so are we sort of skinning these particles as they fly away? Like, how are you making these streaklets?
How I'm making the particles themselves. So basically, once you create the vector field, this is where I visualize it. Sorry, this is visualizing the wind. But
that wind is a reverse of the motion of the pod that I wanted to mention, because it is very important to match that speed, because otherwise it will look kind of weird that your simulation could be either too slow for its motion or too fast.
Yeah. That's another thing that I learned from Albert. All the things we're going to share here is basically Albert teaching me all kinds of, like, there are subtleties, but so basic that once you understand them and know them, they apply for everything. So reach physical correctness at a certain level, which is important in terms of speed, in terms of, impact, velocity, lighting. It doesn't really matter, lighting direction. But once you have that, at least you have a certain base that works, and you can bend it to your shot. If you want to artistically direct it a little bit more, you can, match your lighting a little bit better to the next shot if it needs to. So that's definitely related to that. Once I basically create, you can see it's a very, very simple, and I don't think really heavy. I basically feed it into dot network that just feeds particles and advects directly from the valve. So in a practical sense, that would be the fastest way, at least that I think, to create, kind of like a system that utilizes particles into a believable level of density that could give you something that looks like sparks and fire. In this case, I'm using motion blur in render time. So you could see a little bit drafty, but you could see that there are multiple layers within it. So definitely the fine particles that are getting motion blur directly from the render, and the sparks that are a little bit more particle refined lines that you could see. That I'm using a simple trail lines. So you trail the points, and by ID, you basically just connect them. So you can see that
We've had a few people asking about rendering. I suppose maybe a decent time to mention you are working with Mantra here.
Yep.
And is it slow?
Well, anything could be slow. Anything. Yeah. Really depends on what you do. So I remember a lot of times I came to Albert, and again, came to him with like, I used to be right all this time. And, it's a different kind of approach. You have to understand a lot of things. I'll give you tips right ahead. Like, I converted all my textures into RAP format. Houdini does this in Mantra right off the bat. It does that in render time. But you could save that time because it will try to do it again and again and again if you have EXRs. So I would suggest take your EXRs at the very end, just convert them into RAP. And you could do that from the command line. There is a little command line. You could Google it. And just convert them, and it will be speeding up your render quite significantly. And there are so many other ways you could optimize. If I go into my render settings right now, this wouldn't be the best example because I'm rendering on black background and there are no things affecting anything really. But every setting that you have here is very vital to basically what you're trying to accomplish. If you have, in the limits, reflection limit at like 10, it will try to calculate in your environment 10 bounces, if I'm not mistaken, for all your objects. And there's no real need for that. Sometimes you just want to lower it into 2, just max it like that, cap it, and you'll speed up your render. And that goes for a lot of solutions for, maybe you're rendering a shot that is a little bit noisy. Sometimes you could denoise it in post. Sometimes that's a good solution. And you don't have to crank up, samples right here or anywhere else. It's about picking your battle. I had a lot of those with Mantra, for sure.
I can only add here that this is the point where it's important to understand your software rather than know your tool. Mm-hmm. Because tools can be different. You can jump from one renderer to another, from one software to another, but you have to understand an underlying idea of it. In case of Mantra, we have been using Mantra till today, almost every day for certain stuff, for high budget movies, and nobody complains. You have to understand how to adjust it. So, some people can say that maybe GPU renders are fast. Yep, they can be, but for example, GPU render might be limited to the amount of memory of your credit card, graphics card, or credit card as well.
Yeah, big time.
It's all related.
All together.
And I understand that actually GPUs are maybe not so efficient at rendering certain things, like volumes perhaps, or not as efficient, or not as fully featured, not as powerful as what a CPU renderer on Mantra can do.
I mean, each one of them have a pros and cons. I think every software is going towards the GPU. Even Mantra is leaning towards that direction, as I believe. But you have to know your software, your tool set. You have to know how to use it, and you can definitely utilize it in the best way.
Guys, I'd like to just interject here for a moment to call attention to time. I think we should go to Q&A at about 1:15, which gives us a little over 10 minutes. I thought it might be a good idea to mention something about compositing, or at least talk a little bit about that if you feel ready to talk comp.
Yeah, for sure. Albert, you could definitely give an introduction to...
Well, sure.
Yes, sum up Nuke in 6 minutes. You have 6 minutes.
So in terms of compositing, of course, same approach as in any other Visual Effects studio. We would make sure that we are splitting everything into so-called AOVs. That means all the necessary bits are rendered separately, so we don't have to re-render them over and over again when we change one thing. Let's say we have a broad view of the shot, and there are a few trees, and we want to change just the explosion. There's no point of re-rendering trees. So we have divided all of this, and we have utilized deep compositing, especially for your shots, because there's a lot of volumes in this case. So I wanted to make sure that we can render a volume, or like explosion, or maybe this kind of a low-hanging fog in your white shot on the ground, and not necessarily needed to re-render it all the time. So with deep compositing, which is, in a summary, it is a way of storing 3D pixel, or rather pixel in a 3D space. And you can also store a color in 3D space. Therefore, you don't have to cut out your renders, matte out your renders with other elements. You can just do it on the fly in the Nuke.
Exactly, and I would like to, first of all, apologies for this script. I am really sorry. I remember having a few bad days with this with this shot. Make it more organized if you're doing new comps, okay? But
websites, scripts from...
Yeah. It's also good to show what not to do. We could do it a lot more organized, that's for sure. Always have your Nuke script going down. And I'm pretty sure I have a friend over there doing like that. So yeah, basically the one suggestion that I have for deeps, use them. Because like Albert said, they could save you time. But use them for holdouts. So basically, deeps are very, very heavy. You got a point cloud in a certain way coming from the camera's direction, and it could be very heavy once you have all of these together. If I combine them right now, we'll be sitting a very long time for that to calculate. So I basically make a write node for each single holdout. So you could see that I'm basically exporting holdouts of alpha, so I can use in my very messy comp later on. but it makes it so much faster if you just lay that out first and then operate with it, because you could just re-render only the elements you want, just like Albert said, and really save a ton of time and make your workflow just a lot better. So yeah.
And you sort of specifying how far back in Z space these deeps allow you to see, right? That is already.
They are technically already there. Like the info is already there based on your camera. You can import your camera, which God forgive me, where the hell is it? It should be somewhere here. And once you have the camera and once you have your deeps, again, they're in a certain relationship that every point is exactly where it needs to be to occlude each other. And once you merge your deeps together, that's basically the way to do it. Because otherwise they get very, very heavy.
Yeah, they do, and
they take up all your hard drive space. So
is this something that is encoded into the EXR image sequence, or is this a separate file system, or how does that?
Once you check deeps, yeah. So
it's written into the EXR.
Well, yeah. So at the beginning, deeps that were invented at Weta Digital, they had their own file format, and I think ILM, who, as far as I remember, is one of the creators of EXR format, with a EXR version 2, they implemented the deep data in the EXR version 2. So for last, I think, 10 years, we have deeps inside EXR's ability to actually keep. By default, I think when you put Mantra, it will try to store deeps into RAT format, but you can always change that and just keep it as a EXR.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, many people don't like them because, yes, I agree. They tend to be very heavy, but at the same time, it is always a question, depending on your workflow, what's faster? Re-render a very heavy, simulation explosion or some kind of a volume, or just do a pre-comp. It's a tough battle. It's some cases. It's you have to pick your battles, and some cases when the simulation, and the rendering of this kind of a volume can take up to hours, let's say 10 hours, and doing a pre-comp could take half an hour. But yeah, it can be sometimes the situation where pre-comp can take longer than simulation itself. Not simulation, sorry, rendering.
Yeah.
So it's a picking your battles. Definitely.
Well, I would say we could potentially get into the questions now, unless there's anything that you felt you wanted to say before we potentially take a different direction.
I think I can close with another tip. When I was talking about being optimized, I had quickly prepared a very simple example here. Let me do. Just as another example of why you want to understand your software rather than learning where the tools are. In this case, I have a very simple text. And what is happening is we are generating this effect of the light, of the neon light, ourselves as a color data. That means everything is interactive. It's not a light. It's literally a data. Just to show you how it looks, I'm giving a set of points, and another input is just a grid, nothing else, and we are computing what light would compute. For some, this can be a little bit terrifying in the beginning, and yes, I understand. It's actually not that complex. It's a very simple code that just goes through every point and checks what's the distance to the point. We are calculating the quadric decay of a point light, and also what will be the Lambertian response on the geometry, and based on that, we're calculating color. But what I want to show you here, it's about the understanding how computer graphics works per se. because this kind of a knowledge can help you as an effects artist. Because as an effects artist, most of the time when you work on a new type of effects, or maybe some kind of a magical type of effect, this is the knowledge that you have to utilize to come up with something new, original, and utilize this kind of a technical knowledge and artistic knowledge for creation. And even we can, put this kind of a effect into the volume, and this is really interactive. No lighting needed, no rendering needed, and this is physically correct as normally light would behave, because we are using exactly the same mathematical properties of any physical light that is calculated by Mantra or any other renderer.
Yep, that's in the viewport, people.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. And you're simply just telling each and every point, or in this case, voxel, have this color, be this color. Yeah, you're just saying be this color. Not
exactly. We are just literally coloring every point. It's no magic here. It's a very simple, literally a 3 lines of a very simple code. But it's not about the code itself. It's not about grabbing somebody's scene file. It's not about watching a tutorial and just recreating that. It's about understanding, because when you as an artist, you get the task to create something, let's say magical. Let's say you have a new Harry Potter movie. This is where you have to utilize your imagination combining with your knowledge. And this is where you can combine all of that to create something new and beautiful at the same time. This is just an example. We actually use this technique in few movies that were not released yet. So I'm not going to talk about exactly what and how, but as a technique, it's very similar. To exactly the same what render would do. Yeah, that's all I wanted to show. Just learn how CG works, and you can use any kind of a tool. You can jump to Blender, Houdini, whatnot. Houdini is just a tool that for you to use. Yeah,
but it allows you to access CG on an extremely granular level. It's all about points. It's all about points in space and the data that every one of those points has. And Houdini, more than any other software, gives you the ability to very interactively, very dynamically write information into points based on an endless variety of criteria.
Exactly.
Which makes it just insanely useful for everything.
Yes. You that kind of a possibility of a granular editing, it's great. I know that some people were scared of using Houdini because it sounds kind of a technical, but yeah, it does. And at least 15 years ago, when somebody heard Houdini, that's the same like saying a coding in C++. Yeah. But today it's completely not. Side Effects is making a great job to make this tool a very useful for anyone, and studios are utilizing Houdini for modeling, for environment, for animation, for rigging, for lighting, and it's a tool that is really growing out. There are studios that are only using Houdini from start to finish, and some studios are slowly getting into that point. And nowadays, those tools are so easy to use. You don't have to know a single line of coding. You don't have to understand even that to be able to use it. Sure, of course, that knowledge will help potentially you in the future to create something unique, but it's not necessary to do your job. I know a lot of artists, as senior artists, which never wrote a single line of code, but they generate amazing effects, and they are just amazing. It's this kind of a saying that Houdini is a technical tool. Yeah, I think that passed. You can use it like that, sure, and I sometimes do. I love it, but not necessarily you have to.
Well, guys, it seems my camera may be down. I don't know if you see me or not. Hopefully you still hear me.
We hear you.
Let's just move on to a few questions. And one of the questions that I saw pop up, I think it's always an interesting thing to talk about, is more the psychology of learning this stuff. You know, I can't remember what his name was. Jonathan actually is his name. And he asked, you know, like, how do you stay sane when learning something as deeply complex as this? And obviously, you know, you're hitting some roadblocks and things are getting a little frustrating. What techniques do you have?
I think this is the best question to you, Ryan.
I'm not saying.
I think it was directed at you.
How do you stay sane?
Yeah.
If anyone will find the answer to that question, that's not me. But I can definitely say that you need a purpose. You need something to drive you, because the information that's out there is boundless. There will never be a point where you say, I learned enough, I know everything. There will never be such a time, because information is just so vast. And I often just joke like, okay, I gotta make room in my brain for this new thing. But at some point, I think what really helps is having a goal, having something like an objective or a target that you just want to reach, you just want to set for yourself. That will propel you forward, whether you like it or not. I think that's how it works for me. And that kind of brings me to, you know, every step of the way to try and like break another boundary. That's all I can give from my experience.
Yeah, too right. Regarding, you know, the kind of bigger picture of what you learned throughout this project, if you had to do this again, and I suppose you're doing part 2 eventually, maybe, you know, what would you do differently, or, you know, how would you approach things differently if you had to do this again? So
I already went through this question with myself like a lot of times, because usually when I make a shot, I finish it. I think I finish it. It's never finished. You can go and look at it and pixel screw it over and over and over again. And I actually, for instance, like in one of the shots that I showed, it went through 2 different revisions. I could probably take it through 4 other different revisions. It's important to know where to stop, but there is so much I would do differently. With the knowledge that I have right now, to just say a few, even just the setup that I did for the friction, I definitely want to make it a bit more practical use for, you know, as a tool, not just for that specific shot, but maybe for a variety of shots. Like if I'm doing a lot more objects, that would be nice to have. If I'm doing the explosion, maybe, I don't know. I'm always thinking about, okay, I could have done this angle or that angle, but, you know, it could go in so many different ways. And I'm kind of training myself to let go. I'm in that kind of point where I could look at a shot and just butcher it over and over and over again. And I need to train myself to actually let go of something. And for part 2, I think I'm mostly worried about that cut that we will feel. Okay, this was kind of like while studying Houdini as a beginner level. And part 2 will kind of be like, okay, I know Houdini a little bit better now. So it will probably integrate a lot more complex stuff to, you know, utilize other things that I don't know. So we'll see how that blends in.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that and afraid.
There's been a couple of questions, like somebody asked, you know, did you model the pod in Houdini or did you model it in Maya? And someone else has asked, you know, I mean, I think people are kind of concerned probably if they've invested in other 3D suites, like, do I need to use both, or can I do everything in one? Or what was your workflow between Maya and Houdini? Like, how were you able to break that up?
Okay, that's a good question, because I was debating about that. I was thinking, the first time I'm going to Houdini, that's a big 3D package that offers basically everything. But I wanted to pick my battles again and just try to focus more on the scene layout and see how much I could create in Houdini without going overboard. But for the assets, I definitely went to 3D Studio Max, could go into Maya, just create your assets. That's definitely a normal thing in a pipeline. Working in DNEG ILM, everybody uses like different programs, but you could definitely have your secondary 3D package that you create your models in, you UV map, you go into Substance or Mari, you texture your objects. and then you create your assets and structured folders. You import basically everything in Alembics format or whatever format you're comfortable with directly into Houdini, and start hooking up your shaders, and you're good to go. You can always cross 3D packages with no problem, especially now with USD, I think, which I haven't explored yet, but that's definitely an option. So yeah, definitely feel free. I modeled the pod and I modeled the house and the fence. And basically the vegetation is a variety of mega scans and stuff like that. But yeah.
I wanted to add asterisks to that. If you work on your own personal projects, really does not matter. I would say don't force yourself to maybe tool you don't feel comfortable with. You can use Blender for that matter. But if you think about making a project that would prepare you for work, I would suggest you, it's not a bad idea to get familiar with a software that is being used by a company that you wish to work for. Because maybe companies that are utilizing Houdini and maybe if you want to be a modeler and they utilize Maya, won't appreciate the fact that you're very fast in 3D Studio Max, because they're not going to get a software for you. They have a pipeline. They have a workflow that you have to adjust towards too. So it's good to do your homework, see what kind of a software is used in a studio that you wish to work for. But beside that, like Orion said, a normal and typical pipeline in VFX studios is people are using software that is dedicated for it. We don't track the camera in Nuke. We don't model in Houdini. We don't do textures in Houdini. There are better software for that. Just use what's best for the task. Yeah,
absolutely. Another interesting question came up that I think, Albert, you will be well suited to answer. He says, instead of using tools to shape knowledge, can you recommend a course or reference for 3D computer graphics in general? He says, coming from a 2D photo background, or I guess, Photoshop user, but, general CG. Yeah.
Well, my personal general 3D knowledge was a set of books, especially the older books like RenderMan books, because all that knowledge is identical everywhere. Every software that we have today, no exceptions, work on exactly the same mathematical principles, exactly the same physical principles. There's no difference. So even if you get to understand how shading works based on older books that describe it for RenderMan, it's exactly the same everywhere else. So the books would be the best to understand that. And this is my way of teaching as well, making sure that you understand it, not rather than know where to press which button or what kind of a code to write. It's not the case. You as an artist, you have to be creative. You have to come up with your own techniques, your own style. But first, you have to understand it. And yes, I can probably suggest some books there. I can put some recommendations.
So I feel like we maybe have 5 minutes left. We can go longer if you want. I mean, how are we feeling?
Good, yeah.
How is everyone feeling all right?
Yeah, for sure.
Is the chat feeling good for another 5 minutes at least? Somebody was asking, what do you mean? Is that RenderMan? Is that a book? I think we should maybe try and type out a little list in the chat of useful of useful links. And one question that I know is on a lot of people's minds is, okay, I want to learn Houdini. Where should I start? Which YouTube tutorial series should I watch? Which blog should I sign up to? And my entry was really Entagma. And then I found guys like CG Forge, and there's a whole The amazing thing about Houdini and 3D in general, and especially Houdini, is that the more complicated and difficult it is to get into this, the more people there are out there trying to help you learn it. It's actually it's an inverse relationship. You're actually drowning in excellent tutorial series to learn to get into Houdini.
I actually want to add to that, Albert. I want to explain exactly the reason why I think I did something that a lot of people ask me, like, what tutorial did you follow? And there are no tutorials for re-entry as far as I know. I looked. And there won't ever be tutorials for that exact thing you're looking for. Because in the past, I made this portal, for instance, and it was based on NPC's work on X-Men. And there were no tutorials on that. And I had to reverse engineer it and understand it in that kind of fashion. But here in this manner, it's like Albert told me at the very beginning, you could look at tutorials and see what kind of tools they're using and try to like make an average of like all the tutorials you see. But these days, I barely watch tutorials. I can tap into something very specific in a tutorial, but the very end, it's like Albert said, learning the fundamentals and the why of something, how something works. It will basically give you that ability to assess what it is that you want to do, and all the tools that you've used before and understood them will kind of like line up for you in a logical sense. That sort of like clicked for me personally, because I learned like through Albert that, you know, he has that kind of understanding. And obviously there are a lot of really amazing tutorials out there, that's for sure, that could definitely help you. But that's kind of like, for me, that's kind of the difference in that kind of way.
I just wanted to mention to everyone in the chat room, everyone here in the webinar, that Albert has just sent me a link to an Amazon list of books, which I now can't paste. Webinar Jam hates me. I'm trying to paste this link into the chat, and I can't.
I think it's there now. Albert
did.
Hopefully someone will do that for me.
I think it's already there.
Yeah, I think
okay.
I did. So just quickly, just one of the series of books I own and I went through. There's definitely a lot more, and some of them might be easier, some of them might be harder. Like, definitely, I always own some kind of a book regarding math. It's with FX, it's useful. It's useful to understand some mathematical concept, especially when you're getting into them. So that's a suggestion. The art and science of digital compositing. This is an amazing book for any CG artist. This is something that you definitely should go through. It explains a lot of concepts when it goes to computer graphics. And the Renderman is more in depth into technical things of how shading works and how lighting will work. It's very, very good to know. There are a few other books that I can suggest in general about the lighting, maybe. Not all of them I personally read, but I found that they might be useful. I want to get into them, but yeah, just check it out.
Fantastic. I think that's probably an excellent place to stop. That's a solid 90 minutes that we've just had here. I think
I have one
pretty well. Hope you guys feel the same way.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'm not sure if we can continue even in answering on a chat because I see that there's a lot of questions. I don't mind answering them.
I mean, if you guys want to stick around for a little longer, I suppose we can extend this out. It'd be good to get a feel from the chat if people are still keen on answering questions. Was there something that you identified, Albert, that you'd like to answer?
On the top, I see that somebody's asking if the ray tracer compute shadows as well. Yes, it did. And it's all described. So just to answer that question, a long time ago, I did a brief tutorial on my personal website. I'll also add it here. I wanted to explain how rendering works. How ray tracing works, and I went through a few of those things, like explaining how shadow is calculating, how few aspects of rendering are working, and it's not the point that you should know it and you should be able to write your own renderer. I mean, sure, if you're interested, be my guest. But sometimes when you work on some unique effects, you may find yourself that knowledge that you gain here, it might be compatible with something that you have to create here. and something will spark in mind that, hey, maybe I can utilize the knowledge how to ray trace something, and maybe I can do projection onto my geometry, and therefore I can do some kind of effect. This is the idea of understanding how computer graphics works can spark some ideas of creating original effects. Cool.
There's definitely a few people asking about learning Vex, which I'm encouraged to see. And I was definitely a sort of person who thought, there's no way I could ever learn to code. There's no way I could do this. And actually, once I started learning Houdini, I thought, you know what, maybe I can, and I really should. And I think people should. If you're going to do computer graphics, it's always going to be useful to you to have a little bit of coding. So, you know, where's a great way to learn Vex? And I think, and again, in Tagma's Vex course was excellent. And there's also this really great guy, Junichiro Horikawa, who is currently doing a Vex series, and it's free, totally free. And
live sessions.
He's excellent.
Yeah.
But there's just so many.
My suggestion, because, you know, I came from a little bit different background, starting over 20 years ago. I didn't have any tutorials. There was no YouTube even. Vex is just a language, computer graphics language, like C, like C++. If you get to any kind of a computer language, coding language, not computer graphics language, just coding language, you find a lot of similarities. So just understanding any type of language would help you take the same way of thinking into new spot. Whenever it's Python, C++, Java, whatever you do, it's about way of thinking. That's what's most important.
Yeah, and actually, with regards to Vex, Houdini, in a way, makes learning to code Vex and therefore C even easier by providing VOPs, because VOPs is an amazing way to bridge, to help you understand the syntax and the way that you would need to write your code in order for it to have a successful operation. And it makes it a little easier to get into coding by giving you the option of laying it out in nodes and VOPs.
Also, I just can quickly show you guys that even if you do something in VOPs, if you're not familiar with Vex, let's say I'm adding one thing to another, you can always right-click and say, hey, I want to see that node, that VOP in the Vex. And it will give you a bunch of additional information that not necessarily is needed, but you get the general idea of how this code works. This is sometimes I actually get into that back in the days where I was not sure how to approach it, but I knew how to do it in nodes. So I just quickly connected with the nodes and I checked how it looks for Houdini in the Vex side of view, and okay, that makes sense, because Houdini is working in Vex. Every VOPs are actually Vex. They are translated into Vex on the fly. So you can always check that out. That's one of the way of learning, I guess.
Yeah, and one important thing to know is that actually working in Vex is a much more efficient use of your computer CPU. Do I have that right? Like, it's better multi-threading?
I mean, with VOPs, it's no difference. Vex and VOPs will be the same because it is translated into Vex. I would say maybe Vex could be a little bit cleaner, but Vex overall is super efficient. Sometimes it's comparable to C++ because it's already multi-threaded. With C++, you have to generate code that would be multi-threaded. Python is not multi-threaded, so if you compare Python to Vex, always Vex will be faster. It's just that multi-threading that kills it. But between Vex and VOPs should be no difference of the speed. It's the same thing. It is translated at the end to Vex when Houdini executes it. Cool. Unless you see any other questions. What's the Albert's website? Okay, I'm going to write them. That's a very old website. I haven't updated it for, I think, 7 years. But the information I was mentioning, it's still there. John, you're muted again.
Oops. There's someone asking about how Houdini is used in a lighting environment. And regarding Solaris, can you talk to that at all?
I can say that Solaris is a very new thing. Karma is still in beta. I know that some studios, as far as I remember, DreamWorks was showcasing their use of Solaris from very get-go. So some studios have very nicely implemented already. Some studios are slowly looking into that. Usually studios are not jumping into new versions of Houdini straight away because implementing a new version of Houdini takes time. Sometimes a lot of libraries are changed. Sometimes you have to redo some kind of a tool set. It takes time. So it's not so easy. Hey, we're going to update to 18.5 tomorrow. And also a new versions of software sometimes mean that they're not necessarily as stable. So it is a very big risk. So I would imagine that most of studios will be using 18.5 in a year or maybe two. I'm not sure about the Solaris like overall. I think only DreamWorks and maybe Rising Sun Pictures. I'm just guessing here. I have no idea.
And this talks to USD, right? This is all to do with the implementation of this new system. It stands for Universal Scene Description. And, well, you know what? I'm not going to try and explain any more about it. Please tell us a little more about USD.
Well, to be honest, I'm new to USD as well. So USD was created by Pixar. They came up with this kind of universal description of the scene file. Because we have a universal description of the file formats, like FBX was one of the attempts to be shareable. Alembic was the second attempt, but there was nothing that really encapsulates everything. And USD was this kind of a answer to it. Just let's standardize it. Let's make this universal. So Renderman, as far as I remember, came with that idea first, and they started to spread out. And people noticed that, yes, there is a big potential. It would be awesome if we could use exactly the same file format in every software. You know, no conversions needed, no loss of information, because everybody is using the same standard. So that is slowly getting implemented. The same like ACES. It's kind of a standardization of the color across multiple software. It's just to make a workflow of the company, whichever the company is, a little bit easier.
Right. So the idea is that you could build a scene in Houdini. You're not exactly exporting it as a USD. You are simply just sort of that information is just there. You're writing a file, and then Unreal can access that, or Maya can access that, or Unity, or anything, and then you're getting the same. You're getting all the same points attributes that you get from Houdini. Like that is a standard that cascades through. So if you were to write point attributes in your USD, you will be able to access that in Unreal.
In some way, yes, that's a general idea. So USD as a standard has some specifications you have to follow, and as soon as you follow the specification, it will be universally accessible for any other software. That's the idea, yeah.
Time for any more? We're coming on to 2 hours here.
I think we answered most of the questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's one other that was sort of maybe piqued my interest a little bit. Realism versus cartoon stylization in terms of, is Houdini better at one or the other? I would imagine that working on cartoons in Houdini would be fantastic.
Well, look at the Sony and how they achieved their effect in Spider-Verse.
Right. Sure. I mean, a lot of that looked like a lot of comp too.
Well, yeah, of course. There is a lot of work. There is a lot of, lighting, and they use Arnold, and there's a lot of compositing on top. But there's also a lot of tools in Houdini. So
I used it for that Dragon Ball Z thing.
Exactly.
You did.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course you did.
It was amazing.
I wasn't sure if you used Maya or Houdini for that, but I
definitely used for the 3D Studio Max render. But the aura, for instance, for like a Dragon Ball Z kind of aura, So you have to flatten it out. And I talk to Albert like I always do. Try to look for ideas. Like there are so many ways to do it. And then suddenly, yeah, Houdini could definitely be used for like cartoony effects. The second I did that, but like there was no chance I could have done that in any other program because I had to literally dig into Vex and Raffle a little bit with that. So that's definitely the answer.
And I think the procedural nature of Houdini will just allow for so much more expression in the animation. You can try so many things out
Exactly.
with your stretches and your squashes and your anticipation and all that kind of stuff. Like you could really leverage Houdini as a massive time saver in the animation process because of the rigs that you build.
Yep.
I think I'd like to hand it back to Scott, who would like to say some final words before we close this out.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Orion and Albert, and of course, John and Carlos, for taking time today to share this information with us. I know there's always more. I mean, it's like anything. This can go on and on and on. But I would also just like to mention that, one of the key things that came out of this relationship between Orion and Albert is that they are connected now. And Orion referenced it a moment ago. Working on another project, who does he reach out to? He reaches out to Albert. Albert's one of those guys. He isn't always getting a paycheck for this. He does it because he's a great guy. He does it because he really cares. And I think you'll find that the vast majority of people in the industry do give back. They do share their secrets. They do encourage the up and coming artists to work hard and we give them direction and give them advice. I would always encourage all of you to never be afraid to ask those questions. As a school think tank, I often help people that have really nothing to do with my school because it's gonna come back one day. I'll get it back in one way or another, and I'm not really too concerned about that. I'm more concerned that they get the right information and that they're well informed. It always pains me when I feel that people are going in a wrong direction, and I know that money is money and time is time, and it's a big deal. And I often say too, with Orion is a good example. This isn't just career changing. This is life changing. You get an opportunity like working at ILM in Vancouver. I think Vancouver is a wonderful place to live. I've worked and lived in Europe as well, and I had a great time there. But these things and what you know can change your life. So don't be afraid to take on something because it could open a huge door for you. And working with people like Albert and Orion and John, and these are the guys that can really help you get there. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. This isn't a big sell. I'm not really concerned about that. I'm more just concerned. I just want to share this. Let's see here if I can just get this to go up. Let's just share this one. I'm not sure if this is showing the right screen. If I'm showing my mentor selector, am I?
Yes, you are, Scott. Yep.
So you can see there's a vast number of mentors working with us, but this isn't the limit. I would say that you can go off menu, and you can. I think in some cases, like in Orion's case, Albert's name came up, and I was like, Albert, yep.
Now he's in the menu.
So. We do mentorships at the campus, but obviously with the situation in the world right now, we're doing a lot of mentorships online. And I'm not just saying think tank's the only school that you can go to. There's lots of good schools around the world, but I would say some are better than others. So do your homework, really do your homework. Ask people that are successful. How did you get here? Who did you talk to? What did you do? Those kinds of questions will get you good answers and lead you in a good place. So never be afraid to ask those questions. You can ask me, you can ask Albert, you can ask Orion or John. Everybody is going to give you roughly the same message. But I have to warn you, it's a lot of work, and you have to be ready for that. This industry can be a bear, but I got to say, I worked in it for about 10 years and I had a great time. I really had a great time. I think it's a real privilege to work in this industry. The projects I can't even imagine the projects that Albert's had to work on over the years. I mean, really so many cool things, and he must just have this huge shopping list of amazing experiences. And Orion's just getting started. He's the Albert of tomorrow. I think it's a really cool thing. So I'm really excited for him. He's getting in on the top floor. I have to say, I'm a little jealous.
Yeah.
But good for you. You totally earned it, Orion. So congratulations.
Very inspiring.
What would have happened if I didn't came into your office one day at the very, very beginning and said, "Listen, Scott, I'm lost. I don't know what
Yeah, well,
Kind of pointed me in the right direction. I don't think any of this would have happened if I didn't do that. But was too scared to say something. Like sometimes that's something I want to say to a lot of people. Just don't even be scared of asking for help. I did it and it helped. Like people were there to help me at Think Tank. So
yeah, it really is true. It's an amazingly supportive community of people who are learning Houdini and 3D in general. It's surprising, as long as you know how to ask the right questions and demonstrate that you've done your best to find the answer yourself. Once you're at that level where you can ask the right questions in the right way, people want to help.
Yeah, that's true. And if you have any questions you want to get to us, you can always go on our website and send us the question. They do funnel back to me in a lot of cases, depending on the question you're asking. But I won't always tell you that we're the right school for you. Even in Orion's case, I almost steered him to one of my competitors initially, but he said no. He said no. My friends at Think Tank. I understand the way you guys do things. The mentorship is a better fit for me, and he decided to come, despite me sort of saying, maybe we're not the right one for you. We're willing to do that. We're willing to say maybe this isn't the right thing for you. But in his case, it did turn out really well. I think the relationship with Albert was key, obviously. But we have lots of talented, hardworking, really sweet people working with us. Albert's currently mentoring 2 people for us, and I think that it's exciting. It's really exciting. So I love that. So anyway, that's all from me. I don't know if you guys want to add a couple of final words.
Somebody asked about DLI approved. What does that mean to be DLI approved?
Yeah.
And are we?
Think Tank is DLI approved.
Yeah.
But that's just the name. Yeah, the designated learning.
I see. Is there some kind of certification for it?
Yeah, we're certified in almost everything. There's a couple things we're not, but it is because we're a private school.
Exactly.
I hate to say it, but the private schools tend to be slightly more progressive than the public schools, and that's just the ergonomics of a public school. They're bigger, slower moving, etc. Whereas I can go and hire Albert in a heartbeat. It takes a phone call, and I can hire or an email, and it's really easy to do. So we do that a lot. So.
And lastly, I think it is possible to hire Albert directly. You have a website, the VFX Mentor. Is that right? And
what?
So people can sidestep you, Scott,
and
just go directly. Oh, Albert, you didn't tell Scott about that. Sorry to blow your cover on that.
So in addition, I was doing this kind of a schooling for anyone if it's somebody professional working already in the industry, so not necessarily have a time for school, then I'm very happy to help. That's the general idea. Yeah, definitely if you're starting from scratch, I would suggest you going through the school, because you should have first a basic knowledge and know how it works. And then with the Think Tank Center, you have all the mentors with a different departments, and you can learn overall how it works. And then on top of it, Think Tank Center gives you a mentorship. What I'm offering separately, it's something that if you need a quick tip or if you're maybe working somewhere or anything, it depends where you stand, I would say. Yeah, if you, for example, cannot go to school for some reason, then definitely you can contact me. But otherwise, yeah, I would suggest you that school will give you, even much more, because Scott is going to give you place, computer, and other tutors. You have an access to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, we do train a generalist foundation first in every area, and then we want you to specialize and work with somebody like Albert.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm not offended if you want to go work with Albert directly. It's all good. There's enough Albert to go around.
But yeah, I'm not going to give you a computer, and I'm not going to teach you, other aspects. It's a more direct.
And you know what? Who knows? One day Orion might be on my mentor list.
Oh, yeah. I think it's very likely.
Yeah. I'm still telling Orion to actually start creating his own tutorial.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there you go.
Maybe you should do a tutorial about re-entry.
Well,
Right,
I
right.
mean, you did say that there isn't one out there. So
There you go. Yeah.
so a little bit.
All right. Well, I think that's
Okay,
it
guys,
from us
that wraps
today,
it up.
everyone. Carlos is posting the link so you can watch the recording. And there are links for the school if you're interested in that. And of course, Albert's posted his link. So if you want to go to visit his site, I'm sure you can get a hold of him there. Thank you again for your time, everyone. Appreciate it on a nice Saturday. You're sitting indoors staring at a screen again. So
We are tanning.
yes, it's the Studio 10.
And I want to say thank you to everyone involved that basically, took me under their wing. That's not taken for granted, and also the right fit to make that happen. Because things just like fell into place like puzzles for me. And I think for a lot of people, they just went to think tank and that happened to them. So I just want to say thank you, and that's a privilege for me.
And all those artists end up in a great studios like you.
well, thanks, Orion.
That's a win-win.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know how to turn this thing off. Anybody?
Just quit.
Now this
Smash the escape button.
Smash the like button.
Okay.
All right. Everybody stay
Bye,
safe.
everyone.
See you out there.
Nice work.
See you in the movies. Bye-bye.
Bye.